Wow, Steve, thank you very, very much. That introduction would mean a lot coming from anyone. It means a lot to me coming from you. Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here in Saskatoon with you all at, well, it is, I guess, the beginning of the conference, the PNWER conference. For those who are visiting the great province of Saskatchewan, you have come at a propitious time, because the people in the province of Saskatchewan right now, they're feeling pretty good, I think. Not because of the government. The government is definitely a work in progress. They're feeling pretty good because it's summer. They're feeling pretty good because for most of the province, the crops are actually looking pretty good. It's rainy today, and it was raining a bit yesterday, but that too is fortunate because we had a couple of weeks of some pretty significant heat, and so again, it's reflecting on the crops out there, and there's a ways to go to get them to the bin, but people are in a pretty good mood. The economy is strong here again, not because of the government of Saskatchewan, but because of some external factors, and hopefully because of the fact that we've tried to stay out of the way as much as we can, out of the way of Saskatchewan entrepreneurs who are building what is one of the strongest economies in the country. And they're happy because the football team is winning, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, if you're from Alberta or British Columbia, would you do me the favor of just raising your... So, welcome. First of all, welcome. And secondly, for the rest of you, you're looking at folks who do not cheer for teams in the CFL who are now #1 in the league. So go easy on them. I see the Mitchells here, and I'm getting there's Doug and Lois Mitchell, obviously long-term leaders within the community of Calgary and the Stampeders, and I want to say hello to them especially today as well. And you know, I think your team's still got a pretty good chance the rest of the way through. Just wait, he's saying. I see Ambassador Wilkins in the crowd too, and if you'll permit me, Ambassador, to say welcome back to your, what I'm going to call your second home. Welcome back to Saskatchewan, to you and your delegation. Thank you for what you continue to do for the province. I think this is the 5th PNWER conference that the Ambassador has attended for a time as the Ambassador, and since then in his other post-public life. And I just want to thank him for being here and thank him for his friendship. When he first came to Saskatchewan as ambassador, I was the leader of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen, and no other ambassador had taken the time to meet with the leader of the opposition at the time, at least when I was the leader of the opposition, until this man, until David Wilkins came through the province, and he certainly met with the Premier of the day for a lengthy meeting, but wanted to pay at least a courtesy visit to the opposition leader, and we had a great chat that day. We canvassed a number of issues from BSE to trade, you name it. And at the very end of the meeting, I was very impressed because he asked how my kids were. He asked why I would ever cheer for the Oakland Raiders. And then he asked how our dog Oreo was. And I said, oh, Ambassador, I feel terrible. Oreo passed away a couple of months ago. And he pauses for a minute and says, well, you ought to update your website. We have a new dog. His name is Zeke. And he's on the website. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to canvass some issues around the relationship between our two great democracies, between Canada and the United States. I'm going to speak bluntly, if I may, about the state of that relationship. Not because of interests in this room, but because of other interests, perhaps. And I'll get into that in a moment. I also hope to speak hopefully about the future of the relationship and the constructive role that we are called to play as members of PNWER, as those who are interested in the deliberations here over the next couple of days, because I think we can bring to bear some constructive help in the relationship, and we ought to. It's a very, very important relationship, as we all know. 25 years ago, Canadians were involved in a great and emotional debate about signing a free trade agreement with the United States of America. An election was fought on that debate. And for those who were opposed to free trade, those in the room will remember from the Canadian side, there were dire predictions about what would happen were we to sign that document. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, 25 years later, after that free trade agreement is signed, Canada is not an American colony. We have our own arts and our own culture. We still have our own magazines. Our football field has not shrunk. The beaver and the eagle are existing together peacefully. And more importantly, here are the facts. The numbers show free trade has been a boon to both countries. In 2011, bilateral trade was more than $550 billion, with more than $1.5 billion worth of goods crossing the border every single day. That's a statistic most in this room know, but not our fellow citizens necessarily. This, of course, then is the largest trading partnership on the face of the planet. And by the way, those numbers are more than 2.5 times greater than the amount traded before the free trade agreement. We throw these numbers around pretty liberally, I think. We ought not to. We ought to consider that because of that 2.5-fold increase in trade between our two countries, it means more families in your state and my province are working. More public goods are being supported on a broader tax base. That's what trade means. That's what our free trade means. 1 in 7 jobs in our country is dependent upon this trading relationship with the United States. 8 million jobs throughout the United States are dependent on this relationship. Last year, Saskatchewan exported more to Illinois, that one state, than to China, India, and Japan combined. Our exports to PNWER member states were valued at about $1.6 billion. That's a significant amount from a province of 1 million people. Saskatchewan is a major customer for the United States. 87% of our imports come from America, and about half of what Canada imports, $277 billion worth of goods in 2011, comes from the United States, and I think there are now 37 states of the Union that list Canada as their #1 export market. And that's just the commercial side of the relationship. That's just the business that we do. Then there's the friendship. Then there's the shared values. The fact that we are each lovers of freedom and defenders of liberty. That we are each champions of and protectors of human rights. It is Canada's profound good fortune to have established not just good and strong commercial ties with the United States, but a friendship. And I think it's fair to say that the United States of America has no greater friend or ally than the Dominion of Canada. But friends, all relationships, the best relationships, need tending. They need vigilance. They need care, and I think that's especially true these days because there are some challenging developments recently in this relationship. Both sides can claim credit for some of the challenges or blame, as the case may be. I have a few examples I want to share with you. About 3 years ago, it was our turn to host the Premier's summer meeting. We did it in Regina, in our capital city. Our federal government, the Prime Minister, had asked the territorial premiers and the provincial premiers to come up with a plan whereby he could take to the U.S. National Administration the opening up of procurement of provincial contracts, provincial tendering, and municipal tendering to deal with the Buy American provisions that were in that first iteration of the stimulus package. And in a way that I hadn't seen before or since, the premiers came together. And the premiers were in contact with some municipal leaders in their respective jurisdictions, and we were able to hammer out that agreement and say to the Prime Minister, absolutely, when you meet with the President of the United States, you can tell him that for the first time that anyone could remember, all procurement, municipal and provincial, would be open to American companies without any bias or favor. And there was the attendant exemption granted then in that first iteration of Buy American, only to reappear just a couple of years later in the next iteration of a stimulus package, of a Buy American plan from the administration. I got to speak bluntly when I tell you that's frustrating, especially when as much goodwill on both sides was accorded and expended to get us to the point where we were only to find ourselves right back at the beginning. There are smaller things, a $5.50 tax imposed on Canadians entering the U.S. by air, and other little irritants that Canada has done to our U.S. partners who wish to do more business here. There's the Detroit Bridge issue, and significantly for us in Western Canada, there is the Keystone XL pipeline. And I am hopeful of a resolution there in the next number of months. But ladies and gentlemen, I think I need to canvass the issue a little bit, especially for those who are visiting us from the United States, our partners in PNWER, so they perhaps can see the perspective we have as a result of the decision taken by the national administration. In our view, the delay was made for political reasons, especially after the Nebraska Compromise was obviously available to the project. And maybe not the administration, but those who advocated for its delay or denial stateside were using terms like dirty Canadian oil. We hear that in Saskatchewan, though we don't have oil sands projects here. We hope to one day. We have the potential for it. But we hear that and we wince a little bit, along with Alberta, and we do so in our province. We're the second largest producer of conventional oil, and again, we have the potential for oil sands development. We think, dirty Canadian oil. Decreed, I guess, by the great scientific minds of Robert Redford and Daryl Hannah, maybe. Dirty Canadian oil. Or perhaps a little bit, maybe up to 20% conventional oil in that pipeline when it's approved from that rogue nation, North Dakota. Because that pipeline will carry conventional oil, up to 20 to 25% from the Bakken Formation. Dirty Canadian oil. We know about the life cycle analysis that has been done on oil from different sources in the world, and we know that there's more work to do on our side of the border, but we also understand that California thermal oil has about the same life cycle CO2 footprint as SAGD, oil sands, oil in Alberta, and a much higher footprint than any oil you'll find in the Bakken, in Saskatchewan, or in other conventional plays across the West. There was the allegation carried in the New York Times by opinion leaders who are respected in the United States that called our oil extreme energy. Extreme energy. That includes Saskatchewan, by the way. It has to, because we're part of Canada and there's no distinction between heavy or oil sands or conventional. Extreme energy. I'll tell you what I think extreme energy is. I think energy that's secured directly or indirectly by putting the sons and daughters of Americans in harm's way, that's extreme energy. Energy that you acquire from countries whose the majority of the citizens of which just flat don't like you. That's extreme energy. We know we have more work to do in this country with respect to increasing the sustainability of our energy development. But I don't think you'll find a country where the national and the subnational governments are investing more per capita, or just a straight comparison, in mitigating CO2 in terms of oil development, or restoring habitat, or looking after water. You won't find a country where the companies are doing that, or the governments are doing that, like this country, like ours. And arguably, when you take a look at what the companies are doing in the U.S., like they are in America as well. So these events are disquieting. These events are not helpful, and don't get me wrong, it's a two-way street. But the events have this country looking at all of its options. In Saskatchewan, we're the second least dependent on the U.S. for our exports. And we're 60% dependent. We're the second least dependent. That's a lot of eggs in one basket. So I think, notwithstanding the state of the current relationship, we'd be wise to diversify. And we're doing that. In Asia, we welcome our friends here from India and Bangladesh today. We're looking to expand our markets to diversify. The government of Canada has concluded free trade agreements in South America. It's in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement with the EU. And we're grateful for the U.S. for their help in securing the invitation to participate in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We in Saskatchewan, and I dare say the Canadian side of the PNWER jurisdiction, support these initiatives. But we know that our economic fate is intertwined in this relationship, in this, the largest trading relationship on earth, and we want to tend it. We need to be vigilant about it. As we move forward, I believe it behooves each of us in this room, decision makers and leaders from both sides of the border, to curb our protectionist instincts, because we all have them. We all have election cycles. We need to remember why we bothered to reduce trade impediments in the first place, why we went through that debate. The long-term result and what we've experienced on this continent because of trade, because of this relationship and friendship is what? It's the expansion of wealth and the creation of jobs, and families are better off, and public services are provided, and tithes are brought. We've seen a reduction in poverty because of that economy, and not that there was any trouble before, but peace among the nations, except for maybe the 2010 Olympic hockey final. This organization, PNWER, formed just a few years after the FTA was signed, has a lot to offer as a conveyance for that goodwill and for that constructive approach to our relationship. Just one example is the Beyond the Borders Working Group, which has come through with very, very helpful suggestions. I think it was referenced today at the breakfast. Suggestions to ease congestion and enhance security at the border. We can each be an advocate for free trade, fair trade, but free trade, to guard against protectionism. And we have some credibility in this regard because of the relationship that you've forged already, and because we come to this discussion from the perspective of economic strength. Comparatively speaking, there are a few regions on the globe today that are as strong economically as we are today and have the prospects for continued strength in the economy as PNWER members have today. We would like to be a part of that in Saskatchewan. We would like to continue to play an active role in PNWER, to be part of the solution. We know this region of ours is blessed with immense natural resources and world-class manufacturers and great post-secondary institutions and innovators and entrepreneurs. And we also know that in this region, we can offer the world what they want most. The fastest growing economies of the world want food security and energy security, and think a little bit about what you all offer. In Saskatchewan, we're very proud to have about 45% of the world's potash reserves. We'd like to take credit for that as a government, but we understand there may have been another hand at play there. Somebody said, you know, you're the Saudi Arabia of potash. I said, no, actually, no, Saudi Arabia only has about 18% of the world's oil. We have 45% of the world's potash. We have almost half of the arable acres in the country here in our province. Again, we're blessed to have it. It's a quarter of the world's flax, quarter of the world's mustard is produced in this province where you're met, 2/3 of the world's lentil exports, more than half of the world's dried peat exports. We are Canada's second largest producer of oil, home to a large part of that Bakken Play, a formation we grudgingly share with Montana and North Dakota. We're trying to take care of that with some horizontal drilling, but so, as it turns out, so is North Dakota. Sometimes they're going to meet in the middle. We produce 20% of the world's uranium from this province. About 5% of the lights that will burn in America tonight will burn because of Saskatchewan, will be on because of Saskatchewan uranium. And our natural resources, we want them to serve as the foundation to what's next in the province. And dare I say, I think that should be the vision for this entire region. Right now in Saskatchewan, there are more than 700 scientists working on agricultural biotech research, food security related research at 30 facilities, public, private, and academic. We will invest public money in wheat research in the months ahead, long overdue. And by the way, when it comes to wheat, cereal grains and pulses, again, a huge strength for our region, and I think warranting some public and private sector partnerships in terms of added investment. The same goes for energy. We're working to develop enhanced oil recovery techniques that will help unlock heretofore uncoverable oil reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, in Saskatchewan, we're blessed. We've got about 45.6 billion barrels of oil in place, not nearly as much as some places, but quite a bit. 38 billion barrels of that oil in place is unrecoverable with current technology. If we could increase our recovery rate in, by the way, this math works across the PNWER region, right across North America. If we could increase our recovery rate of oil by just 5%, we would triple our production. What would that do for North American energy independence, North American energy security? If perhaps we were to work together on that, again, with the private sector. We're also wanting to be a leader in clean coal technology. In 2014, SaskPower will flip the switch on the world's first commercial power plant with a fully integrated carbon capture unit. 1 million tons of CO2 a year will be captured. We're already actually storing 40% of the world's successfully geologically stored CO2 in this province. Why? Because Canada and the United States work together. Because North Dakota and Saskatchewan work together. Because we are capturing CO2 from a coal gas-fired plant in Beulah, North Dakota. We pipe it up to southeastern Saskatchewan. It's used to enhance oil recovery, reanimating existing oil fields so we don't have to drill more holes. Then it's reinjected back into geological storage where the International Energy Agency monitors it and proves, and I think they basically, well, I better not speak for them. I think the evidence is coming in pretty strong that geological storage of CO2 is an efficacious way to deal with CO2. We're going to do more of it. We're going to invest with Hitachi in another carbon capture test facility. We understand that coal's not going away, ladies and gentlemen. In India, they plan to add 200,000 megawatts of coal-fired capacity in the next decade. It's a 300% increase. In China, they're building a new coal-fired power plant every month. So, we ought to be leading in technologies to clean up coal if we can. We're going to make that investment. Again, a $1.4 billion public investment. Another inconvenient truth for those who might question whether or not we're serious about CO2 in the environment here in the West, here in the PNWER region. Finally, our government's investing in a new nuclear research center at the University of Saskatchewan here in Saskatoon with partners from Hitachi. We want to, among other things, focus on small reactor technology as something that's going to be positive for the future. Just by way of conclusion, I think it bears repeating. The relationship we have is just so important to all of us, for the economy, for our societies. And there will always be challenges. There are some now caused on both sides of the border. But what I like about this organization is the conveyance it offers to deal with those constructively, to engage with our respective national governments, to engage with interests on both sides of the border that maybe have a little bit more volume than fact sometimes on some issues. We have that opportunity through PNWER, and I hope we take it. We live in one of the richest, most dynamic areas of the world. This is a region of astounding beauty, of great natural resources, of an energetic, skilled, and ambitious people wanting to test the limits of human knowledge and push us even further, and a place where citizens of two countries live basically together and thrive together because of their shared history, because of their values. Yes, we do business together, but we also play together. And through forest fires and flood, we care for each other. We, when liberty's at stake, fight together. And we've died together. It's not hyperbole. To underscore a deep affection that exists between us, there was an event on July 4th in our capital city of Regina. I'll share with you in conclusion. There was a woman by the name of Crean Boven England. She was seen putting up the stars and stripes in her front yard on the 4th, right near her Canadian flag that flies all year round. Crean has done this every year for a decade to honor her neighbor Carrie, a California woman who moved to Regina after marrying a Canadian. That's love. He must have told her it's just a dry cold. I've been here all my life. I still don't know what that means. It's been a while now, but sadly, Corrine passed away just over a year ago. And so this July 4th was especially poignant for Corrine. Here's what she said about Carrie. She said, "She was just a terrific person, one of the nicest I've ever met, and I miss her." Those aren't citizens of two countries. Those are friends. These are the words of friends. John F. Kennedy said it best. Geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature hath so joined together, let no man put asunder. What unites us is far greater than what divides us. May that sentiment inform your work over the next 2 days, and then what we each do after this conference. May it inform our desire to improve this relationship that's so much more than just business. Thanks for listening. May God bless the United States of America and the Dominion of Canada. Have a great conference.